Yo, what is up guys? Cool412 the Fox here. Now anyways, we want to welcome you all to another exciting edition of a Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. And man, after my last review on Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, it really sparked a lot of great memories to catch up on a film I remembered watching a long time ago. And now we're on to the fourth film of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, and I'm talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And man, The Dream Master, that's a film I haven't seen in a long time, but yet a lot of great memories in The Dream Master. But there are a lot of great moments I remember throughout the film, but sadly, the actress from the third film of A Nightmare on Elm Street, Dream Warriors, was the one who played Kristen Parker, sadly did not return to the fourth film due to pregnancy. And I'm talking about Patricia Arquette. Because it turns out that Patricia Arquette did not return to the fourth film of A Nightmare on Elm Street, The Dream Master, to reprise her role as Kristen Parker due to pregnancy. And I will get to that in just a moment when we start the review, but man, all the thing I can say is The Dream Master, I think, is still one of the best classics of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. I would never forget. But anyways, let's dive right in to A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and how Freddy made his return. The movie begins with a classic title card, and yet A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master is still, I think, has one of the best openings of the film in my book, along with all the other great films. As the film begins, we see a little girl drawing chalk on the ground, and from the looks like someone is drawing an art of a house of some sort, and that is when we see the return of Kristen Parker, played by Tuesday Knight. And like I said earlier, sadly, Patricia Arquette did not return to her role as Kristen Parker because, due to pregnancy, it was under doctor's orders to not return to acting. And from the looks of it, Tuesday Knight and Patricia Arquette, after I looked at them, and from the looks of it, they look like twins. And I think it fit the role for Tuesday Knight perfectly. But anyways, by the time Kristen Parker walked in from the third film, after surviving Freddy, she saw a little girl and she says, "Hello, may I help you?" And that was where she asked if she lived here, and she said, "No one lives here." And that was when she asked about Freddy, if he's home. And that was when she laughed and said "Freddy ain't here right now." Then it showed her artwork of the house and Freddy in the window. Then the storm began, and Kristen walked right in, all frightened and scared. But that was when we see the kids playing jump rope and singing once again Freddy's song. And when the door slammed, after they said, "Grab your crucifix," she saw a tricycle come down the stairs. She tried to leave, but when she opened the door, it still showed the tricycle coming down the stairs. And it led to bad to worse. She tried to stay calm through the situation, but then it took her right to the boiler room. And then she called upon Kincaid and Joey for help. But by the time Kincaid was called up, his dog was underneath the bed, which I found out the dog's name is Jason. And I was like, well, a dog named Jason after Jason Voorhees. I was like, what is this? Did he get named after Jason Voorhees, and are we seeing a sneak peek preview of some sort? But whatever it was, I was kind of stunned. But anyways, Kincaid went flying right through the wall and made it all the way to the boiler room, and he was not happy for what happened. And then when Joey popped up, they were trying to explain to her that Freddy's gone and he's already not coming back. And that was where they remember that they defeated him from the third film. And leading into the whole ordeal that they wanted her to feel the boiler. It's still cold, not turned on. But by the time she looked in the boiler, we see Kincaid's dog Jason popped up and bit her arm. But when they woke up, they all thought it was just one regular dream. But however, it wasn't. That was where it led to bad to worse. That it was revealed that Kristen got bit and put bandages on it, but Jason, after the bite, Kincaid was shocked. But then we cut to the next day where Kristen pulled up to her friend Alice's house, the next final girl of the film. And Alice, I think, is still known as one of the greatest characters of all time, from the fourth film to the fifth. But anyways, as it pointed out that she went to pick up her boyfriend to go to school, and that led to where the whole story began, where Alice's father, who was not happy about the whole ordeal, knowing he was getting ready for work, and from the looks of it, her boyfriend came from out the window. And her boyfriend was kind of cool looking, a funny guy. But the dad, on the other hand, was more of a dangerous guy, but who was always angry so much and strict. And that led to where Alice's brother was more of a practical joker. But then we cut to the school, where we were introduced to a whole colorful cast of characters. And then we were introduced to Alice's boyfriend, Dan, a high school football character. And I think it reminds me so much of my brother, who was always a tough son of a gun in high school, who knew how to play football, and always made the papers, no matter what he did. But he was one tough son of a gun, and he still is to this day. But anyways, that is where the other part of the characters, I was getting stunned about at first, until I found out Alice is a bit of a daydreamer. Like, you're still awake, but then you still have dreams in your mind. But in the end, it's really cool. That was where another one of their friends pulled up in a scooter, who had asthma, and I was stunned at first when it pulled down to the whole ordeal of the situation. That is where, in the scene, we see Alice's friend, who is scared of bugs, crushed it with her boot, and it led to where the whole ordeal began. As Kristen was getting ready for her next semester, Kincaid and Joey popped up, and just like from the third film, still, it just sparks a lot of great memories, to say the least. And during the time, it was where her boyfriend popped up, and it points out to the whole ordeal, having the time they were talking about their dreams and hoping for a better day. And that was where it led to the next scene of the film, that Alice prepared dinner for her father. And he's kind of a jerk after seeing his behavior. And he was just like, What are you supposed to think I am? You're gonna feed me like a rabbit? And when he made those sounds, I was like, what are you doing? This is your daughter. Like, what are you doing? She's trying to make sure at least you got something to eat, man. Come on. She daydreamed about it, slamming the plate on the table, snapping at her father, but the reality is, it was just another daydream. But the thing is, it was actually really cool to see that at least some people can try to stand up for themselves, but the reality is, they can't. But as long as they're trying to just live the life they want and just be happy and support that individual, that's all that matters. Now then, anyways, my advice to people is don't let people get you upset and anything like that over things like that, and just understand that it's how it is. But never ever snap at them or argue. It's just going to make things worse. Now then, that's when we cut to Kincaid trying to relax and have a good time. That was until his door opened and his dog Jason walked in. And by the time Kincaid fell asleep, Jason realized, oh no, here we go. And then when he appeared in a dream, he was locked in a trunk of a car. And he realized he was in the junkyard, but when he called for Kristen, she wasn't around anywhere. But when he looked around the junkyard, he saw his dog Jason digging up for something, as every dog would do. And that was where, when he called out for Jason, he looked rabid and angry, like screaming out to him, "Back off, this is too dangerous." And by the time he got done digging, he found Freddy. He was barking at him, growling at him, but then Freddy pulled himself together like the T-1000 from Terminator 2 Judgment Day, but in a different way. But Jason got too scared and he ran for the hills to get away from Freddy. But that was where, after Freddy pulled himself together, he was alive again, and Kincaid ran for it. Freddy woke up, grabbed his fedora, and came out of the ground, and left the message, and said was, "You shouldn't have buried me. I'm not dead." And that was where the chase was on. By the time Kincaid crushed Freddy with the car, he thought he won. Then he tried to run away and try to survive, but all the cars were coming to life, roaring like the engines have never been shut down before. But by the time that all the engines were roaring to life, we hear the car horns and he was screaming out, "Kristen, Freddy's back!" And by the time he echoed throughout the entire earth, it looked like a giant maze of junkyard cars. And then that's where Freddy got him. And that was where Kincaid disrespected Freddy, and Freddy said to him was, "Tell him Freddy sent ya." One down, two to go. And Kincaid was taken out by Freddy in the process. And with his trademark laugh, letting him know. And letting everyone else know that he was back. Then we cut to Joey trying to sleep. And that was where, yeah, I don't want to talk about it. It's kind of inappropriate after what happened. Anyways, what happened was, when he looked at his waterbed, yeah, like I said, I don't want to talk about it, but anyways, he tried to call for whatever it was he saw to come back, but then Freddy came out and was just like, "How's this for a wet dream?" And Freddy took out Joey. And Kristen was the last Elm Street girl left of the Elm Street children. But deep down in my mind, I was stunned at first, when Kristen was unaware of what happened. Then we cut to the next scene where Kristen was shocked out of her mind that Joey and Kincaid were taken out by Freddy, but then she was knocked out in the middle of the semester. And then we get cut glimpses of a nurse trying to wake up Kristen. I realized that she had a nasty bump, but the nurse looked like Robert Englund. And I was like, well, that's the second time in a row I've seen Robert Englund popped up. But then the nurse was smiling and laughing, transformed into Freddy. and again playing his more mental mind games with Kristen, but Kristen actually woke up by an actual nurse, and that was where the nurse said you had a nasty bump, in the same way. And then we cut to where everyone pulled up at the old Elm Street house, and they talked about Freddy's history and everything else. And then we get a glimpse of Kristen's mother popping up again, which I really hate that character. She's disrespectful and doesn't know when to respect her own daughter and her boundaries. And that was where she honked the horn and screamed out to her, "Kristen, get away from that house! Andale, andale!" I was like, what are you doing? Just like from the third film, are you out of your mind? Can't you have shown no respect for your daughter's rights and leave her alone and respect her space? But yet, this character playing Kristen's mother, I was like, well, at least the actress pulled it off, but the character I did not like one bit. Showed no respect. I guess playing the world's strictest mother, but however, it still gave her no right to do that. But by the time everyone headed home, that was where it led to the whole ordeal about Kristen and her mother at dinner. And that was where talking about therapy and everything else, but that was when Kristen found out that her mother gave her sleeping pills in her food. And she apologized to her, realizing that her mother just executed her and took her out with her going to sleep. And that was where she tried calling out to her daughter, but it was too late. Kristen fell asleep. And she ended up in dreamland, but she was at a beach with a little girl named Alice, and she said, "That's nice, I have a friend named Alice." But she always thought that Alice was trying to help her to make her dreams look better. But in the end, it did not go too well, as we saw what looked like to be a shark fin, but it was no ordinary shark fin. It was Freddy Krueger himself coming out of the beach and coming to shore. And that was where it led to back to worse. The chase was on, and she started to sink through the sand like quicksand. And Freddy rocking out some rock and roll shades and marking what looked like to be amazing sunglasses. And man, I wish I had a pair of sunglasses like that. They looked really cool. And then that was where Kristen was screaming out, "No! No!" And then Freddy sunk her underground, leading her back to the Elm Street house. And he was laughing so hard, like he finally accomplished something and was really back. And then that was where it led to bad to worse for Kristen. As she tried to run from Freddy, she was back in the boiler room, and she pointed out to Freddy that they defeated him, and she was just like, "And now you're all alone." As they were having their talk, that was where Kristen called for Alice for help, and she tried to get her out of there. However, Freddy saw her and was just like, "How sweet! Fresh meat!" And to be honest, that reference has been used on numerous occasions, ever since Matilda. And I remembered the principal coming out and was just like, "Move out of my way, move. Ah, fresh meat." But yet, to my amazement, at least Robert Englund had pulled off amazing movie quotes over the years. And he has really played this character to new heights, and no doubt about it in my mind. He'll forever be known as one of the greatest legends in the history of horror movies of all time, and one of the greatest actors of all time in my book. Now then, that was where Kristen tried to get Alice out of the dream, but it was already too late. That was where Freddy picked up Kristen, because Kristen was trying to fight back against Freddy, and that was where he said was, "Now, no one sleeps." And after he threw Kristen into the boiler, Freddy thought he won, but that was when Kristen gave Alice her power. And by the time Alice woke up, she saw a postcard of Freddy and Kristen, and that was where it burnt right in her hand. And that was where her and her brother ran all the way to get to Kristen's house, but it was already too late. The place burnt down, and she was gone, and taken out by Freddy. But then afterwards, that was where Kristen's boyfriend looked through videotapes of the memories that he had with her, including the friend group they formed together. And to be honest, it was really cool to see all that. And yet, throughout the whole ordeal, I, for one, felt bad for the poor guy, knowing he lost his girlfriend. But then that's where we cut to where Alice's friend had a gadget of what looked like to scare off the bugs that her friend was scared of. And by the time they cut to class, it was where they were doing their exams, and it was revealed that Alice pulled her into her dream, and Freddy was playing more mental mind games with the smart one, and saying was, "Learning is fun," with Freddy. And it looked like the ink that she tried to wipe off, but then a robotic hand kind of came out and grabbed her. Alice tried to save her, but it was already too late. Freddy popped up as the teacher. And that was where... Yeah, I don't want to talk about this scene. It was kind of inappropriate, but Freddy, let's just say, took out her friend with a kiss of death, and she was done. By the time, in reality, it made it look like that she was having asthma attack. And by the time she tried to give her inhaler, it was already too late. Alice was worried about everybody else, and she ran for it. And she worked at a diner, it looked like. And it was where Dan walked in, and they had their talk about the whole ordeal. And he was given a package of gum, and he paid for it. And then that is where we cut to the next day at the school, where Alice fell asleep, and her brother and Dan were talking a lot in the locker room. And that was where we cut to Alice's brother's dream. And Alice was worried about him, and that was where he saw his girlfriend looking in the mirror, but then when she turned around, she looked like a dang darn burnt zombie. And then Freddy said, "Going down!" And that was where it led him to a dream where it looked like he was in Japan, trying to fight Freddy. But that was where, as he kicked him, the only thing that flew was his glove. And by the time he called out Freddy again, his glove turned to Dan, or actually, his glove turned to Alice's brother, and I had to apologize about that. I'm a little mixed up today, but anyways, that was where Freddy said, "Sayonara, son!" And Alice's brother was taken out by Freddy. And by the time she screamed out of her mind, the windows broke. And I was like, what the heck? Talk about some explosion. But yet, we then cut to the funeral procession, where Alice was paying tribute to her brother by wearing the glasses. And that was where she started daydreaming about him trying to trick Freddy. And she said, "No more daydreaming." But then, that was where one of her friends approached her, gave her what looked like to be her wristband for protection. And then that was where Alice was supposed to go meet Dan at the restaurant that she worked at. More likely the diner. But, however, her father didn't want her to leave. And she realized that he had no right to keep her there. But then, later on in the film, oh my gosh, one of the most terrifying scenes I remembered that terrified me and why I'm afraid of bugs. But anyways, we see Alice's friend working out, and then it cuts back to Alice walking to a movie theater. As she went to see the movie, it showed glimpses of her work, and that was where like the whole ordeal like sucked her right into the projector, more likely into the screen. And it was kind of like pure 3D fashion, but kind of shocking to me, but didn't see it coming. But anyways, that was where, as she went into the restaurant, she sees a glimpse of herself sleeping in the movie theater. And as she took a seat, she saw an old lady asking her, "What'll it be?" And when she looked at the name tag, she realized it was herself working her entire life in the restaurant. And that's where she said was, "Come on, honey, I don't want to be here forever." And then when she walked away, Freddy came in and was just like, "If food won't kill you, service will." And that was where she brought in a pizza, and Freddy was just like, the usual. My favorite." And it was revealed to be soul food that Freddy would eat, and it was a pepperoni pizza, it looked like, and the meatballs were the souls. And then Freddy was trying to play a little bit of eeny, meeny, miny, and playing more mental mind games with Alice. And that's when he said to her was, "Grindy little meatballs. I love soul food." And by the time he ate the meatball, that was where Alice was scared out of her mind. And Freddy grabbed her, and the only thing he said to her was, "Bring me more." And that was where he saw the glimpse of Alice's friend working out. And that's where he was laughing and said was, "Your shift is over." And that was where I was stunned out of my mind that Freddy was playing more mental mind games with Alice. But as we cut to the glimpse of the workout scene, needless to say, it was kind of disgusting but brutal, but it was like a recap of Alice and Dan trying to get to her friend. But that was where it was cut to Freddy stopping her workout routine. And that was when she said to him was, "I don't believe in you." And that's where he said was, "But I believe in you. No pain, no gain." But then it was, I don't want to talk about it because this scene kind of grossed me out and scared me for life after that. Anyways, it was where Freddy was turning her into a bug. And that was where she tried to escape Freddy, but it was already too late. And she fell and got turned into a bug. And as he looked into the bug trap, that's where he said was, "You can check in, but you can't check out." And by the time he did say that, it was too late. She was taken out. But when Alice saw Freddy in the middle of the road, she tried to run him over, but it was nothing more but what was in her head. I guess it was one way to pay homage to Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. But the war continued on as Dan was being rushed to the hospital, and Alice explained to the doctor to not put him to sleep that he's allergic. And he was like, "Why didn't you say so?" And that was where, when they got there, her father showed up and was worried about her safety again. And that was where he was just like, who's doing this? And she took her dad's car keys and drove off to get ready for a fight with Freddy. Now, this scene, I had to admit, was by God one of the best montage scenes of all time, where she was getting ready for the biggest fight of her life in the dream world against Freddy. It had everything she needed, and the things that she remembered her friends with, including her brother. And by the time she was all prepped and ready to go, that was where Dan was sedated and asleep during surgery. And when he looked up and saw one of the doctors, it was Freddy. He was like, Krueger! And that's where Freddy said was, well, it ain't Dr. Seuss. And as he continued to play his momentum mind games, Alice broke right through the mirror and was in the dream world. Thus the name the Dream Master. And that was where the fight was on. And it led to where they were trying to get away from Freddy, but Freddy was playing more mental mind games as usual. And that was where Freddy said was, up for a spin, lovebirds? And the more that the whole area was spinning, it led to them into what looked like to be an abandoned church. But Dan woke up, and the doctors saved his life. But Alice was all alone in the dream world, ready to fight Freddy. And the kids were singing once again Freddy's song. And when he appeared, the only thing he said was, welcome to Wonderland, Alice. And the fight was on. Alice was trying to fight Freddy with everything she got, what looked like to be her brother's fighting style. But it didn't go too well. But Freddy realized that he's got their souls and she's got their powers. But the more they kept fighting with each other, Freddy again got knocked down, as Alice thought she had him on the ropes. That was where Freddy said his most infamous quote I never forgot about. You think you've got what it takes. And it was where he was pointing out to Alice that he's been through so much as it is, guarding his power for a long time. And he threw Alice on the other side of the church, and I think she went like shoulder first through the table. And I was like, just like straight up, it looked like more like a wrestling match than a fight. Like she got put right through the table. But when she nipped up, it was like a Wild West stare down. She tried to use the gadget. But however, it showed a glimpse where Freddy was still standing and automatically healed himself. And that was where Freddy said, I am eternal. And that was where he knocked down Alice again. But then the kids were looking down at her using the song of the Dream Master. And Alice looked at a shard from the window of the church and said was, evil will see itself, and it shall die! And Freddy looked at himself and all the souls that he had tried to escape him. And by the time that the souls had him, they all escaped and were free, away from Freddy. And Freddy was defeated once again by Alice. Well, at least once again, but this time not by Kristen Parker, but by Alice. And once again, folks, my sincere apologies. I'm a little mixed up today. Anyways, after Alice defeated Freddy, she kicked his glove, signifying that it was over. But then it was revealed that by the time that her and Dan became boyfriend and girlfriend at the wishing well, And that was where he flicked the coin into the well and saw glimpses of Freddy, but Alice was just like stunned out of her mind, realizing that it's far from over. And the only thing he asked her was, "What did you wish for?" And she said was, "If I tell you, it wouldn't come true." And that was a fair point. And at the end of the film, I think was, I believe, one of the most incredible films I ever witnessed. But Freddy Krueger is still one of the most classic characters alongside Michael Myers and Jason Voorhees, because these three are the originals, and I would say the pioneers of the horror genre and the franchise of today. And yet, that's about wraps it up for this edition of A Halloween Nightmare on Friday the 13th. And I'd rate A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, a solid 10 out of 10. And man, thus far though, these reviews are getting amazing. But anyways, join me next time as we review Friday the 13th, Part 4, The Final Friday, which said was the final chapter, which is the end of Jason Voorhees. And yeah, that's not possible, because it's not the final chapter, because let's just say Jason Voorhees' movie still lives on. But you'll find out soon enough when we get to the 5th films. But anyways, that about wraps it up. Be sure to subscribe to this channel, turn on post notifications so you guys do not miss amazing more content like this. And I want to thank you all so much for watching. And be sure to tell my friends I said, "What's up?"